Joining me now from Jerusalem is journalist and author Ilene Prusher. Ilene has covered the Middle East region for major international media outlets, including Time Magazine and the Christian Science Monitor. She is also the author of the novel Baghdad Fixer, which will be released here in the United States soon. Ilene Prusher, welcome to The Heat. Ilene, just this week I was talking to somebody who has an NGO, and she works in Israel with the Israelis. She also works with Palestinians. And I asked her, are these peace talks going to really, will there be an agreement? And I was surprised at her answer. She said she believes so, because this has been something that's been festering for a long time, and that all the sides know there has to be some sort of agreement. She says it may not be a great agreement, but she really feels like there will be an agreement. And I'm wondering if there's that same sense of optimism in the region. Are you sensing that yourself?
You know, one of the things I would say is that there isn't across-the-board pessimism that one could reasonably expect, given how many times we've seen the different leaders and negotiators try and then fail to get an agreement pushed forward. But we have to remember, of course, that they did manage to reach the Oslo Accords in 1993. We also had the Camp David Accords in 1979, a peace accord with Israel and Jordan in 1994. So I think progress is possible, and it can be very hard to sort of look into our crystal balls and try to figure out, is this the right time or not?
Former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert has a memoir out. Former Secretary of State Condi Rice also has one out, and both of them kind of say that that both sides were very close to an agreement during the waning days of the Bush administration. It just kind of fell apart, unraveled. General James Jones was the special envoy for the Middle East Peace Initiative, and I talked to an aide of his several months ago who said there are these really strong forces on both sides that really don't want an agreement, and then when they get very, very close, that kind of draws them apart. Would you agree with that contention?
I do agree with that, and I think one of the sort of unknowns in this process now is whether or not those are the people who are actually in power, acting as the decision makers. I think there's certainly some goodwill and seriousness on both sides, but is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, for example, really ready to make the compromises necessary and bring that back to the Israeli public for their agreement to be reached? That's one question. There's also a question of the Palestinian leader, Mahmoud Abbas. Is he going to be able to back down from some of the Palestinian positions, let's say, compromises on issues like the right of return that Palestinians would like to be able to go back to areas they lived in before the war in 1948. And, you can really very easily find people in both camps who are gung-ho sold on the feasibility of a peace accord, and you can find people who are deeply skeptical and say, for example, the most that the Israeli side would be willing to give in an agreement will not reach the minimum amount that the Palestinians are willing to accept. So I myself don't know, but there certainly is a feeling of seriousness in the air that I haven't seen in a couple of years now of covering this region.
Ilene, U.S. Secretary John Kerry has put together this 9-month timeline. It's been years and years of animosity and deep suspicion. Can something really be worked out in 9 months?
I'm actually a little bit concerned about that part, because I think 9 months flies by very quickly. Many of the journalists were joking that it was sort of like a due date on a pregnancy, and was this baby really going to be viable? Or at least that's what I tweeted after that was announced. So I think that's a really ambitious goal, but at the same time, I think it fulfills the need on both sides, but particularly the Palestinian side, which said we don't want to just go to talks and sort of just go around in circles with talks and more talks without progress. So I think the idea of a 9-month deadline was to say, we can do this, we're going to go full speed ahead, we're not going to meet and then not meet again for another month. At the same time, I think if the parties are making progress, it could always be extended. I don't know that that deadline is really quite as holy as we're making it out to be.
The last round of talks failed in 2011, largely due to Israel's refusal to extend the freeze on settlement building. And ironically, as these round of talks were being discussed, Israel was moving forward with, building thousands of homes, new homes in the East Jerusalem settlement. So what's changed since 2011, do you think? And is this going to be a real issue?
when you also ask Israeli officials about this, they'll say, well, some of these settlements were projects that were in the pipeline for a long time, and it's just a bureaucratic measure. I'm not sure if I really believe that exactly, but what I understood was that there was going to be a kind of a silent freeze this time around, and then that gave way to there being more settlement homes being built, not new settlements, but new homes in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem. But the number doesn't seem to be massive enough, nor do the homes seem to be in places that are, let's say, far-flung hilltops that Palestinians are hoping will be part of their future state. They're not in such numbers or in such places that have made the Palestinians walk away from the peace talks.
Eileen,
so that's quite interesting.
We're just about out of time, so I have to ask you about Hamas. They continue to voice opposition to these talks. Can anything be done if they do it without Hamas?
Hamas does throw a wrench into things, but because of the unrest in Egypt and the basically removal from power of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, Hamas is sitting in a more precarious position than it has been in the last year. And I think that they know that they've lost an important friend and ally in Egypt with the Muslim Brotherhood. So I think they're going to be walking a careful line and not necessarily wanting to rock the boat, and are probably sitting and waiting to see where these peace talks lead.
Ilene Prusher, thank you so much for your time. Certainly appreciate it.
Good being with you, Mike.